Okay, I guess I'll just start. I think Louis is going to. So I'm Alex. I'm the program director and partner here at Indiebio. Louis, who was organizing the event, do you want to come up and do a quick intro?
Yeah. Hi everyone, welcome, and thank you so much for coming. It's been such a great pleasure to see so many people interested in this event, and it shows that I have to go to the door and see who hasn't purchased a ticket yet and wants to still come in and attend the event, because it's, I mean, some people say that these are buzzwords, and other people think that it's really a big technology coming up. I would say both fields, blockchain and life sciences, have really huge potential to change lives and impact millions in this world. And I'm really excited about tonight's talk panel and of course the mingling session afterwards. So first of all, I'd like to give the floor to Alex to talk about Indiebio and this wonderful venue that I want to first of all thank for hosting us and for providing this beautiful space for all of us to get to know each other and to mingle and to learn from our panelists, who I will introduce in a few minutes after Alex is done.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing. I also want to give a shout out to June, our science director and partner here, who also organizes a regular biotech meetup, which happens once or twice a month usually on average. And then also here is Parikshit, our analyst, who's on the side. So I'll give a quick intro to Indiebio, a few thoughts on blockchain, and then hand it over. So Indiebio is a venture capital fund and seed stage biotech accelerator. As far as we know, we are the most active investor in the world in life sciences by the number of companies funded. So in the last 2.5 years, we've had 67 companies come through the program. And as of Monday, when 14 new companies came in, we were at 81 funded biotech companies. They've raised over $100 million in the last 2.5 years for a market cap of over $500 million. And we really pushed teams to get the revenue. And this year it's projected to be right around 35 million or so for all the alumni companies. So our mission is to help scientists become entrepreneurs. We fund PhDs, postdocs, and other scientists from all around the world, literally all around the world. They come here to the Bay Area in exchange for a $250K investment, which gives us equity. We also have a really structured program. It's 4 months long, so it's infused with design, turning scientific insight into an actual product for customers, and building business, getting to revenue and investment all around that. Downstairs, we have a biosafety level 1 and level 2 lab that teams have access to as part of the program 24/7, as well as a large mentor network of investors, industry experts, academic advisors, media, and on. And then at the end of the program, we have a demo day nearby at Herbst Theater. It's around 800 people. You guys are we open up to the community as well as our investor network and beyond. So that'll be in mid-April, where all the teams present. It's on YouTube and TechCrunch, and you can find it online. So when it comes to kind of our views of the world, we see biology as a technology that can be applied to pretty much all verticals. We're industry agnostic, so we don't just do healthcare, medical devices, and therapeutics. We actually will go anywhere that biology can touch. So for examples, in future food and ag, we've been really active. Our most famous company in the space is called Memphis Meats. You guys have heard of them. They grow chicken, beef, pork, and duck in the lab. Recently raised about 17 million from Cargill, Bill Gates, and Richard Branson. There's also a number of companies doing plant-based foods, functional foods, and agriculture. On the consumer side, we have a number of companies. One that I really love is called MycoWorks. They're actually making leather by binding agricultural waste with the roots of mushrooms, mycelium. So they can grow about a sheet the size of a cowhide in 2 weeks that has a performance of leather. They can put different colors and prints into it. And one of the first applications they were looking at was actually making an all-micro leather shoe with some large corporate partners. Neurotech. We have a couple of new companies in neuroscience, and one of our really well-known alumni is called Hanaku. they're actually putting human neurons on a chip to do computation. And the first applications of that are making artificial nose, so they can train this chip to sense different smells involved in compounds. And they have a large deal with actually an aerospace company and airport to basically use these sensors to make an airport where you can get out of your car, and the end vision is to walk from your car all the way onto a plane with these sensors detecting in place of TSA and regular security. Computationally, one company that I think is really interesting is Duggirala. They're sequencing the immune system and how it changes over time in a reaction to disease. There's a huge volume of data that we are getting from the immune system and why different patients respond differently to cancers, therapeutic treatments to that, also autoimmune disease and other things like that. Industrial biotech, one that I think will actually be relevant with blockchain. There's a company called bioinspira that makes biological sensors. So they're building these IoT devices right now along natural gas pipelines. They can detect really small amounts of volatile gas leaks, whereas right now people are driving up and down pipelines with basically a machine to detect gas leak. Medical tools and devices, we recently funded a company that builds an artificial implantable kidney. So this has actually gone into an animal study during the 4-month window of Indiebio, and they actually were able to filter urine and get basically not having rejection or clotting on the device and getting urine out. So it's a tool to replace dialysis in patients eventually. Therapeutics, in our last batch we had a gene therapy company, basically delivering gene therapy across mucous membranes in the GI tract and lungs, eyes, and other places. And the first indication is for a rare disease that leads to colon cancer in 100% of people who have it. And last one is regenerative medicine, which is a space we're really excited about and seeing a lot of new companies emerging. In our last batch, we had a company called Trellis, which is a 3D bioprinting company. They're using 2-photon lasers to actually polymerize collagen around cells to print human tissue and organs. And during the time they were here, they were actually able to build blood vessels that didn't leak, so they could hold water and blood, as well as a human lymph node that could create human antibodies that were attenuated to Zika when challenged with the virus. So quickly to jump into blockchain, we have had actually one company called Health Linkages in the space. They're doing data provenance for large healthcare institutions. So basically within hospitals, you can have security of data from the point it's measured all the way through in the life of that patient, and also do much more efficient data analysis on it. And then when multiple institutions have their system, they can actually share patient data without the identifying information for large-scale population studies. And a few other applications I think would be pretty exciting and up-and-coming in blockchain are for consumers, personal electronic medical wallets. So one, when you jump between institutions, being able to take your data with you, and the other is being able to release your data to large-scale studies, like genomics, and also a few others I'll mention. Drug supply chain, so it's a very big problem overseas where there are counterfeits in developing worlds, cold chain vaccines and other biological drugs, and just monitoring supply chain in the US. Clinical trial data, so right now there's a problem around one, monitoring consent for patients, another is having integrity of data where you're actually reporting all of the data and not tampering with it, which is a real problem within pharmaceutical space. Post-marketing, where you're monitoring patients after a drug is already approved to make sure there's no adverse effects or black box warnings that appear. And also with much older drugs, when they've been studied in a certain patient population, if you have large-scale anonymous data, you can look at how does a new combination of drugs in a certain patient type actually respond. So you can look at more nuanced populations that are more complicated. One that's really exciting in terms of, we think with gene therapy really on the rise and being able to basically repair genetic defects with more complicated things where there isn't a clear one gene to a phenotype or visible outcome. We need to start understanding what is the host of genotypic mutations that lead to an outcome. So we have a large scale patient sharing of their genotype. We can start actually understanding much more complicated basically traits of human beings. And last two, drug development marketplaces is kind of a new one we've been thinking about, with a lot of new startups using computational design to look at old libraries of drugs. They can see new applications. And to get large pharmaceutical companies to share, in theory, you could create a marketplace where They are basically under smart contracts sharing their, basically the large company's library with small companies. And if they get hits, they're by a smart contract probably bound to work together. So it's one we haven't seen, but I think could be exciting. Crowdfunding intellectual property to actually not give up equity, but have a larger source of people who are crowdfunding maybe one asset in a multi-asset company. And thank you guys for listening. June, myself, and Perkshit will give tours after the panel. So yeah, enjoy.
All right, such a great introduction. I'm very excited to hear about all the Indiebio companies. And actually, before we start, I wanted to do some housekeeping, and I wanted to just ask who are the Indiebio companies who are in the audience right now? Can you just raise your hands? So just all right. So if you want to mingle and meet the companies who are going to be at Indiebio, these are the people you want to meet after the panel is done. And now I'd like to welcome the panelists. So Reese Jones, Angie Curlo, Chandra Duggirala, and Sishu. I'll give just a short introduction because I guess everyone read the event description. I'm super excited about today's panel, and to start with Angie, she's probably present everywhere. At least I have the impression she's been with Singularity University, she's been with Draper University, she's involved with the robotics lab. She's a great entrepreneur. She's working with a stealth venture from Singularity University that she might tell a little bit about later. And then Reese Jones, I probably don't even need to introduce. He's one of the associate founders of Singularity University. He's a really avid investor in blockchain, and he's also a biophysicist. So he knows really well the topics of blockchain as well as life sciences, biotechnology, biochemistry, and above all, he's the person to talk to about exponential technologies. And then Chandra, he's a co-founder, or probably the founder of Aqua Foundation. So Aqua Foundation is a really interesting startup that leverages the power of blockchain to create funding for biotech research. And Chandra is a serial entrepreneur as well as a physician. So he will give a really good opinion from the medical side of the things. And then last but not least, Sue, she's a managing partner at Amino Capital. So Amino Capital, as the name says, it's an amazing name. I'm so excited by their name to begin with, but what they invest in is even more exciting. So they are connected to human longevity, as well as they were one of the early investors in Omizigo. So Sue is really great at connecting blockchain and life sciences as well. So I'm very excited about the upcoming panel, and think about your questions. We'll take a few questions by the end of the panel from the audience, and of course after the official panel you can all mingle and ask questions to each other or the panelists. They will be here. And just to repeat, Alex, Jin and Alex will do tours of Indiebio. So if you're interested in what's happening here, what companies are being started and what companies were started already, don't hesitate to join them and explore that space downstairs. So without further ado, let's start the panel. Actually, maybe one more housekeeping task. So I wanted to know how many people in the audience are related to medical field. Can you raise your hands? All right, that's amazing. I love to see that. So how many people are related to blockchain field? That's great, about half and half. How many people are related to pure research, biotech or biochemistry or? just research. Okay, a few, but I'm really interested to find out more applications for research as well. So don't worry, these topics will be covered as well in the panel. So maybe let's begin with a simple question: how do you see the future for blockchain and life sciences? Like, where do they emerge, and what kind of companies can benefit from these technologies first? Maybe Reese will start. He's the most interconnecting the two different fields.
Well, just to set some context, that basically blockchain is memory and it's distributed on the internet and in a way that you can trust. And so if you have an application that needs memory that you can trust, odds are that's a likely application for employing blockchain in some way. And then that protocol of blockchain is like an internet protocol, like file transfer protocol or transmission control protocol. It's an evolved internet protocol that is built on top of things that have come before. So there's actually a lot of historical infrastructure behind it, and being distributed where it runs on thousands of computers instead of one. It's more robust in terms of not crashing, and it's more trustable and reliable in that even if some of the computers are making errors or have been compromised, the vast majority of them have not, and will point out that the ones that are compromised are doing something wrong. And so the data will be protected, and what you're trying to save will be protected, the memory will be protected, even presumably in the event of nuclear war. So it's a robust and sturdy memory. And as that relates to biology, for those who've studied genetics, or that one analogy to consider is that DNA is kind of like a blockchain, and that it's a memory of all of the species that have come before, and the DNA that we have is a summary of all that's come before plus what's happening in our life. And so that's a little bit of an analogy. It's not precisely the same. And then there are things in the immune system, such as what CRISPR operates on is the memory that's used by bacteria as their immune system. And so it recognizes things that have been seen in the past and cuts them up. And so that's been exploited to be a tool for use in biology to recognize pieces of DNA, cut it up, change it, put it back together. And so there are all kinds of applications that have evolved over billions of years in biology that have to do with memory and distributed systems. And then there are essentially the internet equivalent of it, a blockchain. And so that parallelism should give you ideas of new kinds of applications for this technology. And then just sort of to get things started, the main applications that are special about blockchain probably haven't been invented yet. There's cryptocurrencies, which is one of the early applications that are popular, obviously, growing to about $300 billion total value in the last 10 years. And then there's other newer applications. One came out end of last month called Cyber Kitties, which is now consuming 10% of the blockchain capacity of Ethereum. And you can design the genetics of cats and breed them together, and they're all virtual. So that's a popular application. So it doesn't have to all be serious and all be financially oriented. It's just memory that you can trust.
Yeah, so very simplified, a blockchain is a distributed ledger, and one of its unique applications or uniqueness that blockchain has is that it's immutable. So as Reese was saying, whenever you have a system that will need an intermediary or a third party that will need to, well, look at these things and act as a trustee. And well, we have this in healthcare and life sciences all the time. And as a founder in this area, we see that it's a highly regulated area, and it has many applications because it can disrupt this area that is craving for innovation. So how I see the future in healthcare and life sciences and blockchain is many applications like the ones that Alex was mentioning at the beginning, but also empowering users to use their own data and take decisions on their own, because they can use this data to make decisions, and also connecting pharma with the end patients. So one of the applications that wasn't mentioned at the beginning was the application in supply chain. So by doing drug development, it can be highly automated with smart contracts and with blockchain. So we can use blockchain to track every stage of the development of a drug and make it faster, so we don't have to be so regulated, and it can overcome those situations. So for me, as a founder, I see a lot of problems that we can talk later on each one of the applications, but I see blockchain really disrupting this area and making it easier for founders in the biotech field and pharma, so we can use it and leverage its potential to overcome and stop so regulations and so much middlemen in the middle.
So to recap what Reese and Angie said, it's basically a distributed ledger. It's secured by thousands of computers across the world. When you have a distributed ledger, which is expensive, you have to maintain an up-to-date copy of every damn transaction on every single ledger. You need a consensus protocol that is robust enough. It's very expensive to maintain that many copies of up-to-date ledgers everywhere. Make sure that they're, like we said, they can be actually trusted. How do you trust it? Especially in the presence of malicious actors or adversaries that have huge economic incentives to disrupt the ledger, right? And that's the real application of blockchain. For most data purposes, I don't see that you need the blockchain. You don't need the robustness, you don't need the expense and the inefficiencies that the blockchain brings. But for certain class of assets, like initially it was invented for money, transactions originate in the system, you need to be able to prevent double spending, or it's not money. So that's a moral threat. You definitely need the blockchain. What other assets do you need the blockchain for? I see eventually all valuable scarce assets that can be digitized will probably move to the blockchain. And the biotech sense specifically, almost all the enterprise value of a startup or a biotech startup is in its intellectual property. So intellectual property, securing it, proving the provenance of the intellectual property, making sure that you're able to transact in intellectual property trustlessly across companies and firms and firm boundaries. That's an application. Some companies see the blockchain and tokens as a way of raising money. I think they're treading into dangerous waters because it's not supposed to be equity that's easily tradable. But data marketplace is an interesting application. Anytime or anywhere you need absolute critical provenance of the data coming from multiple sources, and you need to have absolute trust in it, you would probably find a good application for the blockchain, like pharma supply chain. I think that's a really good application.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. Actually, not a lot of, not all the application actually should be built on decentralized ledger. Especially our fund, we have background, a lot of Googlers and people that used to work at Facebook. So, if you come from centralized. So Google win because they actually have a copy of the whole internet. So it's centralized. So it's more efficient. And especially for, if you think of exchange, right? So for NASDAQ, you probably won't anytime soon using decentralized, exchange because the volume is too small, and also Ethereum's currently is very slow. So for professional traders, they still use centralized, exchange. But for casual, trading, it can be used in decentralized exchange. For example, we invest in a company called Kyber, and they are based out of 6 years of research at National University of Singapore. So we love what they are doing using blockchain, but they just, they're not actually raising capital equity. They actually only raising money through ICO. So as a traditional VC firm, and we are forced to actually invest in the next generation web. So it's a shame if it's next generation web. It's a shame that we don't invest in it. So as a fund, we actually also have a token fund. We invest in a company like NewCipher and in their pre-ICO. And NewCipher is a very good example that they can solve a fundamental problem because for blockchain companies, they actually solve because for blockchain, it's actually protocol, so it's open source protocol. And before the open source protocol, people maintain it with, and they're not actually making any money. But blockchain is perfect because it actually incentivizes people, software, to maintain the open source platform. And so that's actually, you can think of, healthcare system. Whenever you wanted to do exchange for secure data, and then you wanted to use actually blockchain, it have that kind of property. But in the meantime, whoever actually created the protocol, they actually save certain of the token for the team. So if you think of Vitalik, they probably get single digit of Ethereum. So probably 2%, 5%. So it's very different than traditional Web 2.0 startups. Oftentimes the founder have 80% of the company. So for open source and blockchain, it's really, because of blockchain, it can incentivize software engineers to actually maintain the open source platform. And in the meantime, another property for blockchain is that because it's open, so it has the internationalization from the very beginning. So if you actually have enter counterfeit drug supply chain or global e-commerce or global trade commerce, and then it naturally fits to that kind of nature. For example, we invest in a company called SkillChain, which was actually founded by Sharem. He actually started Blockchain University. So it's not anything on the public chain. It actually uses Hyperledger, so it's private chain. The reason is a lot of Fortune 500 companies, they're not actually feeling comfortable enough right now to actually put their transaction, because it's transparent, everybody can see their transaction, right? So they're not feeling comfortable to put it on the public chain. So the compromise right now is to put it at the private chain. IBM has the Hyperledger solution. So I think overall, you can think of blockchain right now is like internet in their early days. And there is no, it's like Amazon without payment system, without supply chain system. So it's very slow and it's not very efficient. Especially Reese mentioned CryptoKitties, and you know what happens. So it's crashed, and then you have to put like 4 times gas price, and nobody will mine it either. So I think we can actually continue the discussion later on, but I think it's a very interesting topic.
That's great, and I love the pros and cons of blockchain that were mentioned. So that's true that, for example, blockchain is not necessarily the fastest solution to every problem, and then there are so many pros using blockchain in other applications. So, for example, security or creating trust. And the next question that I wanted to discuss is the different stages of research or development, or actually the service. Like how do they relate to using blockchain in life sciences? So, for example, what about fundraising, or maybe it's better to like record keeping, or for research and development, or creating data security for the product. So something that I overheard from I hear people discussing this, for example, the DNA testing like 23andMe or Ancestry, who has the access to the DNA results, and some people suggested that using blockchain would be a perfect way to ensure that only the recipient or the person who owns the DNA gets the DNA sequencing results. So, and also chain of custody is something that Reese suggested to me, and I looked into it, and I was really interested to find out about yet another way to apply blockchain in research and in later stages of service. So I wanted to know, like, where do you see blockchain most applicable, and where do you see it less applicable in this train of like research and going to service?
So when you talk about research, when there is a need for the data that you're generating to be immediately known by the other participants in the system, and you have to be absolutely sure because it's immutable. You never want to be able to go back and edit or change any form of data that's recorded in the blockchain. If that's the need, I think it's a natural fit. For timestamping applications and clinical trials, that seems to fit. You know, in the research and development pathway, you know, one of the well-known and often discussed problems is that companies publish their protocol. They claim that they want this primary outcome or endpoint, and then the protocol evolves over time. People forget to publish results that are not favorable to whatever it is that they're doing. They just forget. So having a time-stamped audit trail that can be audited at any time and is replicated across many locations is a forcing function to make sure companies and people who do the research actually stick with their plan and report the results even if they don't like them.
So for another thing that Chandra didn't mention is for research, and a big part of a biotech company is their IP, right? So being able to push forward the research that we're doing in a biotech company by sharing that, by collaborating with other companies or with bigger pharma companies, I think that's going to push research a lot more, and that's exactly what he's working on. Another thing that I see is clinical trials. It's a huge pain for all life science founders, and it is going to push the science forward a lot more faster.
One of the things about the evolution of the protocol is the early internet, people were afraid to send information over it. They were afraid to do credit card transactions over it. And so they made private networks as alternative to using the public internet for those types of transactions. And as essentially Web 1.0 became more trusted and more reliable, people felt comfortable putting their credit card information on it, and credit card companies adjusted their policies to guarantee that transactions would be reimbursed if they weren't valid. And so it created the ecosystem that allowed Amazon, for example, to grow. And then Web 2.0, which is mostly notable by being open source information as opposed to proprietary, centrally programmed software, was something that the early implementations of Web 2.0 was to replicate things that already existed in Web 1.0. And it wasn't new applications that were taking advantage of the new capabilities of a distributed open source system. And so if you analogize blockchain as Web 3.0, the initial reaction is going to be, let's copy what's in Web 2.0, but do it in blockchain. And we're afraid to do it on the public blockchain, so let's build a private blockchain at higher cost and than a centralized database. And so the kinds of applications that you see in the market now are that kind of thinking, which is, well, let's do something that's proven using this slightly newer approach, but it's not taking advantage of or leveraging the unique capabilities of a distributed, trustable system. And so the applications that do take advantage of that, most obvious are the cryptocurrencies, are still nascent or new in that a tiny fraction of 1% of the people in the world make use of them, and probably not everybody in this room has Bitcoin even, much less multiple different kinds of tokens. And so tokens as a representation of value can be created for anything. They don't have to be just money. You can make a token for this building and say, if everybody in this audience wants to buy a piece of this building, they would get building token 1, and they would then own a piece of this building, and then a contract as to, well, what does that mean if I have one token piece of this building? These are another manifestation of blockchain in that the contract can be a smart contract. So if the building is sold, automatically with no humans intervening, the proceeds of selling the building get returned to you as one of the token buyers. And so this is somewhat like stock, it's somewhat like crowdfunding, it's somewhat like currency in games, but it's a kind of application that there likely will become millions of different kinds of tokens, not fewer. And these tokens will not just be money, they might be intellectual property and patents, or they might be insurance type of agreements that are more of a contract agreement than they are an item of value. And so these kind of things, look for them to come, or think of ideas that you create this yourself, because there's extraordinary opportunity. It's like the beginning of the internet all over again, and you're here at the beginning. And think of, you know, when Amazon started, what were you doing? And you know, this is an opportunity again to take advantage of something like that and look for opportunities in this complex area that's exploding rapidly, and exploding not in a bad way, but in a good way. And people are afraid of it, of course, but that's true of most new things.
Actually, so if you ask how scientists can contribute, and also you know, how our contribution can be rewarded. So remember there was this documentary movie about HeLa cells. So it's immortal cells. A lot of researchers has been using it for different kind of researchers for the last almost centuries, right? So, but the documentary is talking about the original donor, the patient, and she didn't even actually know about this, and it actually traces back to whether she has consent or not. But think of if she can actually you know, donate and also trade her cells, and then that will be like so much revenue for her, or you know, her families, right? So she can get royalties for all the drugs that developed. So, and think of all the scientists here, and if your work can be traced and rewarded later on, that's enormous. That's a game changer. And then, but today, the data that each patient can contribute, not just the cell, not just your skin tissue. And for example, we invest in company Human Longevity, as you mentioned. We also invest in another liquid biopsy company, which is also a unicorn called Grail, which founded by Jeff Huber, previous senior VP of Google. And then think of them, they are actually doing whole genome deep sequencing. So everybody, we have 3 billion base pairs. It's the code of our, you know, like diseases, and they also get our medical records and everything. So we can contribute to the research that you guys are doing. So all those data has to be encrypted, has to have identity, has to be anonymous when it was used, and also it has to have certain patient profile when the recipients or the person that has access to the data can actually only get access to certain patients' data. So all this hasn't been done. So as everybody said, Ethereum right now is very slow, and also we are almost all the companies that we invest in, Almis Go and some other Affinity, and especially Definity. We wanted to bet on the next, protocol and beyond Ethereum, or compatible with Ethereum. So in reality, if people here, if you are healthcare professionals, it's not at the application layer yet. We have to figure out the infrastructure layer.
You want to add?
Yeah, from a basic research point of view, the topic came up earlier about forgetting the data. And one of the things about blockchain being out in the public and that the records in it being immutable is that it's not so easy for data to be forgotten. Like, there are certain people that wanted the research data that showed that cigarettes cause cancer, or that sugar causes heart disease, or any number of types of basic research that were known 50 years ago, but that data was conveniently forgotten while they made huge profits on those products. And so that sometimes people want to forget their research data, or not necessarily the researchers, but the people who fund it. And so that's one of the things to keep in mind as you're putting stuff out on the blockchain. And it can cut both ways, where if you have some new pharmaceutical that you're testing and you find some of the subjects having an adverse reaction, well, it may be because the batch that you just, of the compound that you're testing was counterfeit or compromised, or somewhere in the supply chain of getting it, there was something wrong with it. But if you essentially publish those results to the blockchain, the results of the experiment are there even before you know why it went poorly. And it may be a genuine adverse reaction, or it might just be an experimental problem outside of your control. And so some of these kind of things, if you're doing it all along the way in the public on the blockchain, it's not necessarily what you want for basic research. It will likely change the way basic research and clinical research is done. And if you consider an example like your credit report, and one of the kinds of errors that the companies that collect your credit report do in their database is an error would say, well, actually you've died. And you say, well, no, I haven't died. And you write a letter to the credit agency and say, I didn't die, I'm still here. And they change it, but in their database it says he died, and then you send a letter that said he didn't die, and we fixed it. And so that chain of changes is in the database, and it's in their private database that they maybe sell to people, but when you're putting that kind of thing out on the blockchain, that chain of error, fix, result is going to be viewable in a sense. So there are things that are maybe not ideal about this kind of database for your particular kind of application.
I want to add a little bit to that. So that's a great point. That's the downside of being overexcited about the blockchain. And one of those things is that people tend to forget the blockchain doesn't automatically create trust. Right? It interfaces with the real world. It doesn't change how your research is done. Your data is still going to depend on the sensitivity, specificity of your test, or how it's conducted. Whatever errors that your test captures, or whatever errors that creep into your apparatus or your protocol, or anything that you do, the blockchain just replicates it across 1,000 computers and keeps it there forever. So any data errors cascade through and become a much bigger problem than they otherwise would have if had you not put it on the blockchain. So it's kind of got its own wrinkles. So it's not a panacea. It's not a better database for every application.
Great perspectives. So now I wanted to kind of since we have the greatest minds in both fields here, I wanted to go over different topics. How do you see how blockchain or those who work in blockchain, how they can benefit from this intersection with life sciences, and then how do people in, for example, medical device manufacturing benefit from blockchain, or those who work in like medical practice or in pharmaceuticals? How these different fields can benefit from this intersection of blockchain and life sciences?
I'll start with two of the things that you mentioned. One is how can medical practitioners benefit from the blockchain? One thing is, imagine a world where you had an insurance smart contract to perform a service. You bill, and if you document or whatever the validation mechanism is of proving that you performed a service or proof of work, the smart contract gets executed, and then you get your money, right? That'll make a lot of doctors' lives easy. A second one you could do is what was the other one again? You said pharmaceutical supply chain?
Pharmaceutical or medical device manufacturing.
So medical devices, I think the supply chain application works great for that. If you zoom out for a little bit and think about tokenization, like Reese explained so well, tokens basically represent value, right? And the scarcity is enforced by the blockchain. So for network effects businesses like Facebook or whatever it is, it's obvious and easy. You say, oh, the total lifetime network utility or value delivered by this specific network that is being built is captured in a certain number of tokens. 21 million for Bitcoin, whatever it is for Ethereum, based on the graces of Vitalik. And so you have a compressed lifetime value of a network divided into a certain number of tokens. And the tokens have value if the network has value. So how does that translate to biotech or medical device companies? An interesting way that it can translate to biotech is you could say, we're going to have a certain number of doses of whatever drug it is that we're trying to bring to the market issued in the form of tokens. So you basically pre-sell it. And you have to honor all of those vouchers or whatever it is that you issued in the form of tokens. Pharmaceutical supply chain, I think we already talked about data provenance is critical. If there's a problem with one of the compounds or one of the substances that go into your drugs, you need to be able to trace it. Traceability is of paramount importance. So that makes a lot of sense.
On that same topic of supply chain, one of the innovations that have happened in the last 100 years on supply chain is containerized cargo and barcodes and ways distributed to track the flow of things from where they're made to where they're delivered. And one of the enhancements that's becoming popular is to take that information to another level of barcoding, which is the gene sequences of the microbes that are living on the creatures in the factory where the thing is being made, sequence those, and then what things grow on it as it's in transit, and then put that information just like you would scan a barcode. You put yes, the package just left Memphis, Tennessee, and it's on an airplane and is landing in San Francisco. It landed now. That things can be done not just on the barcodes of the product, but also on the microbes that are the gene sequences, which are kind of barcode of the creatures that are living on the pharmaceutical and precursors that are made in factories all around the world, that you can actually, from that, trace things back, like oil or pills or hardware of various kinds, to the origin. And that in each checkpoint along the supply chain process, it gets checked in, the sequence is read, is written to the blockchain, and so all the people along the supply chain can read where this thing is that I sent, or where this thing that's coming to me is, and know whether it's as planned or something is being counterfeit or misappropriated in some way.
Yeah, and following up with that, I come from a developing country, and in developing countries, over 30% of drugs are counterfeits, and that's a huge problem. And as Reese was saying, looking at the whole supply chain and ensuring that not only the components, but also the environment was correct for those biological products or vaccines. That, for example, vaccines can only be under 15 minutes for under 25 degrees Celsius. And so if we don't ensure those things, we cannot ensure also patients that they are also getting the same product that was tested by pharmaceutical companies. And another thing that I see for pharma companies and how they can exploit blockchain in the future is adapting, getting more risk, taking more risk on their products. Amgen, early this year, they developed this product for cholesterol, and it was 50 times more expensive than the other drugs. And what it allowed Amgen was also take more risk and say, if this drug doesn't work, we're gonna pay the insurance for this drug. So it will allow also innovative business models for pharmaceutical companies to ensure that what they're doing is gonna be what the patient's gonna take, and a new model of that interaction is gonna rise.
I totally agree, and anti-counterfeit is very good pain for a lot of countries. And then we, when we first when SRAM first started skill chain, the number one use case they pitched to us was anti-counterfeit. And then they tried it, but it didn't work out because healthcare is highly regulated industry. FinTech is highly regulated industry. So if you wanted to combine these two, you're gonna actually, encounter a lot of regulations which naturally slow you down. So not just a good idea, but also you wanted to actually make the unit economy works. And for example, but eventually it worked out. You know who used their solution? Financial institutions, because they actually make letter credits almost no cost. For example, like you actually do rentals or something, and then your landlord asks for letter credits, right? So normally it's actually 6% or annual fee or something, because it costs a lot of money currently for a lot of the financial banks to issue letter credits, lawyers, paperwork, and everything. But blockchain naturally it removes paperwork, people, and the transactions. So that's why the financial institution can still issue letter credits for maybe 3% this time, but their cost almost zero. So as Reese said, if it's actually at the global e-commerce, like for different drugs or whatever, cottons and also solar panels, is actually industry agnostic, not just the healthcare. They actually can work with different kinds of banks, can issue letter credits for a very long supply chain. So because the nature of blockchain is that it can actually, for example, before, why I can't lend money to you, because I don't know, like, are you gonna use this money for raw material, or you're gonna use this money for something else, or buy a house? I'm not sure. But this time, because of blockchain, it's possible to trace what you're doing. Especially a lot of the containers have sensors now. So for international trading, if this product actually leave Oakland and going to Shanghai, it's actually traceable. So I can make sure the money that I lended to you is actually used for certain product that I'm ordering. So that's the beauty of blockchain. So it's programmable. And also, I don't have to send somebody at the custom to check it, because I know it's there. Because everything is programmable, and I know it's there. It reached Shanghai, and then the money on the blockchain automatically transfer to your account because it's programmable. So I think for good ideas, there are a lot of good ideas. And for example, SRAM, they also worked on beef. For Australian beef going to China, the custom, they have to make sure that this beef from Australia, not from some other country. So, but it didn't work out because people can actually replace, if the label is there, but the beef, they can replace it. So it's still, there is human error, and manipulation could be happened. Yeah.
Great perspectives. And I think we touched another topic here is blockchain and IoT. So for example, going back to the pharma supply chain example, there's one company that I found out while preparing for the panel, which is called modem.io. So they are a Swiss company that uses RFID chips to monitor the supply chain of drugs, and I think that's what's been covered in the panel so far. So the next question before going to the audience questions, I wanted to ask Sue and Reese, what's the perspective of an investor or someone who are looking for companies in the intersection of life sciences and blockchain? What makes you excited and what you think could be improved in the field?
Basically, 5 years ago when we first started, we wanted to invest in data-driven companies, and now it's data plus machine learning is AI now. So AI is very important because AI solves the it's efficiency, and right now even AI could be automated algorithm. So AI can write algorithm right now, and but blockchain solves different problems. Blockchain solves relationships. So everybody contribute. It's shared economy. So these two comes together because there are so many data generated, and then we wanted to exchange data. And how do we exchange? And it's especially healthcare. Now it's patient-owned data movements. So I wanted to own my own data. It has to be private. It has to be secure. So, but it's exchangeable. So, so like company like Grill and Human Longevity, they generate so much data. So it's just centralized, one company. So how do we maximize the data is to actually using blockchain. So I think this blockchain and AI come hand in hand, and it's a perfect time. But I wanted to point it out, for time freeze wise, large scale utilization for, I think a blockchain is even faster than AI because the capital in it. And for example, a lot of the company that we actually followed for many months and want to invest in them. But those PhD spin-offs, when they start a company, they don't raise equity. They raise ICO, they raise tokens. So and also from day one, they actually can monetize. And then they can incentivize a lot of people. Like there was a fund based in San Francisco. It's a hedge fund, but it hires hundreds of data scientists. Nowadays, probably thousands of data scientists. And then it's almost impossible for a traditional hedge fund to compete with them because they use token, they use blockchain to trace their contribution and get them rewarded. So it's almost impossible for a hedge fund to actually compete with Google, right? But this hedge fund, they just utilize those Google and also some PhDs spare time to work on it. So I just think it's beautiful and it's hand in hand. Yeah, I'm very hopeful.
A couple anecdotal ones that I mentioned CyberKitties already, and if you think about what that is it's a new game that is taking advantage of some of the unique characteristics of this new platform in the same way as Pokemon Go did with mobile phones and as Tetris did with a graphical interface. And so sometimes these kind of clues as to what's an important application are going to be obvious in a game. And so look for that. Another is there's a lot of money is being made on mining tokens. And so the way blockchain it pays people to update the database and keep it current is you have to solve a problem to account for the security of the network, and this takes a lot of computing power. And there's companies, for example, that are creating chips that do this particularly well, and those are interesting business opportunities. And even some of those are like the company Tesla, which allows people to charge their cars for free. Well, the car becomes a very powerful battery that you can put mining equipment in its trunk. And so while it's parked, it can be earning bitcoins for you or for the car. That is an opportunity. And so these are sort of anecdotal things to think about. But, and then like on a more serious note, is tokenizing the assets, whether it's physical assets like buildings or things like stocks, is a huge opportunity because there are millions of them. And one of the panel members has a company that is intending to tokenize virtual assets like intellectual property, but that could be movies or music or documents or art or things like patents or even data. And so those are all categories that are potentially vast from an investment opportunity point of view.
All right, so now I'd like to open the floor to questions from the audience, if you have any. Why don't you just try to say it really loud, and if no one can hear it, then we'll repeat. Yeah.
I'm in pharma, and I take the application to some extent for things like its supply chain and consumer healthcare, some advantages for this application. So the clinical trial space, I mean, pharma companies have dedicated mechanisms for launching clinical databases or audit trails, et cetera. And those are very secure because they're audited by the FDA and FDA. So I'm not seeing the application for the clinical trial area or accelerating that in any particular way. I think what would accelerate and pharma companies are starting to slow to adopt are things like AI or network analysis. So but in any case, I'm not really seeing, so my question is, am I missing something? Is there some other application for clinical trial data that I'm not seeing?
That's a great point, because the point of resistance when you ask a drug company to have their clinical trial, ongoing trial data put on a public shared ledger like the blockchain, they never want to do it. We looked at it, we decided not to pursue that path because there's a lot of resistance, legitimately for good reasons, because you want to control how your data is recorded and how it's properly analyzed, and you want to be in control of that. But there's a problem with the way many trials are done, and the trial results are not reported. And this is not anecdotal. I mean, you can look at the 16 years a trial was not reported because the principal investigator did not like the fact that higher carbohydrate diets had worse outcomes in terms of mortality and cancer risks. So that's valuable public knowledge, right? Sometimes, if it's funded by the industry, they can have their own systems. Ultimately, it's audited by the FDA and the data security. They're on the hook for it if there is any fault there. But for publicly funded research, I think that's a legitimate application.
Well, I see for the application for academia that doesn't have infrastructure for creating secure lock databases, etc.
Yes.
I can see application for academia, and not so much for industry in that regard. I think in the example you gave too about results, data is, data points results are an aggregate summary and analysis of large aggregates of data points. So, and results are dependent upon the algorithm used, the methodology, the statistical assumptions underlying the model. You can take data and put it into a certain algorithm or model and get one result, sometimes put it into another. And you have to be very careful about doing that. So you don't want to put that kind of data out there for the public to just play around with, because they can use the wrong kind of analysis and come up with a very different conclusion or summary result than somebody else using a different algorithm or a different statistical model. So that's
But there's upsides and downsides to that too, right? You pre-specify the statistical model that you're going to use, the sample size calculation, whatever methodology you use, and if it's on the blockchain, maybe people will do something else with it, as long as the investigating group follows through with their original plan and declares the results appropriately. And if they have to remove some data points with the adequate justification, as long as that's documented, I don't see that as a big problem. But opinions can obviously differ.
So along the lines of the previous question, I've read that blockchain could potentially solve one of the major problems in the medical industry, which is interoperability of electronic medical records, being able to have a medical record from hospital A sent to hospital B in a different network through a secure interface. And I guess I'm wondering, along the same lines, what has to happen for a public ledger database to have sufficient trust to transfer personal health information?
Well, the question is not so much as why is it so, why can't the blockchain solve this? It's so much as, why are hospitals still using fax machines to send data about their patients from one to another, right? If it were that critical and if the economic incentives of the hospitals are aligned with efficiency in sharing, you wouldn't be using fax machines. I mean, hospitals know that computers and iPhones and iPads exist, and fast bandwidth lanes exist too. The fact that it's not happening and it's very low on their list of priorities tells me, or any neutral observer, that the economic incentives are not there to solve this data sharing problems. So until that's fixed, I don't think the blockchain will be a magic, key to unlock that value.
Well, there are a few things that the blockchain does that you can trust it a little bit more than the open internet, and that each thing that is logged into it is essentially notarized as having been logged into it. When it gets there, it hasn't been modified, nothing's been lost from it, that there's a check. Is everything here now that was there then? So there are a few things that are added to it that are not part of sending things over the internet. But as you pointed out, their fax machines are the de facto standard for the information that you're sending around, and blockchain doesn't really fix that.
Can I jump in? Because we just funded a company doing this call. Can I make a quick comment on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing I think we saw actually just working with a startup in the space is you have to provide very immediate utility for individual hospitals, because with something that is very network effect oriented, having one or two install them and pay money for that and be accountable to administrators, there's very little incentive for a chief information officer or anyone else to do so. The other is also how can you actually communicate across these health systems when there's Epic, Cerner, and other EHRs that are, they have dominant market positions and they don't have particular incentive to change, going back to incentives both for hospitals and the people who have years and years of patient data that hospitals are actually federally mandated to keep for each patient.
How did your investment solve that problem?
That company is less than a year old. It has not solved that problem. It is working on it. So
They must have an idea.
they have a software platform for inter and intra hospitals.
Saving.
They have a software platform for inter and intra hospital data analysis and sharing, but it is really difficult to sell into healthcare institutions.
Because they're not losing money by replicating all of these tests. They're actually making money by running that CT scanner 5 times after it has been run, like 7 times in the other hospital. That's the problem.
I can chip in that, and we actually have a company, I'm not gonna name it, and it actually have, it's an AI company, and it solved that problem by providing the world's first test that there is nobody else can do this third-party genetic test. So you have to use their test. In return, you are using my medical record system. You have to have something that nobody else has to tackle in there and then do the domain integration, rewrite their EMR system. Then you win.
One last question, please, sir.
It's actually a comment. First of all, I'm the founder of a new, I'm an Indiebio venture member. And one thing that has been mentioned, which is kind of surprising, is that actually in legislation, you have, in some countries, I come from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada is the case, but in Europe, with the GDPR 2018 that's going to be coming up shortly, you have actually legislation that impeaches the data from moving geographically outside of the province, outside of the state. How does the blockchain actually works in that type of legislation where the data is not capable of getting outside of the geographical data center?
It can help by keeping the politicians more accountable.
Right, but it doesn't sound wrong.
That's a kind of regulation, and we didn't really talk about regulation very much, but one of the most severe regulators that those in the medical industry will know are not governments, they're class action contingency law firms and lawyers, that no matter what the regulation is, if you do something that's wrong and harms people, you'll get sued. And the suit is like happened to the tobacco companies and will happen to others. The suit can be huge. And just because the technology allows you to do something and the regulation is something you're trying to comply with or avoid, you're still kind of checked to do the right thing by litigation.
Just a comment on that, if you do look at the GDPR regulations for 2018 throughout the European Union, you will see that penalties are in millions or tens of millions of dollars if you violate what the EU is saying about data management.
Well, the EU is another topic. The EU also created a law and a regulation about the right to be forgotten, so that if you had something go wrong in your life and you appear in a Google search as having done something wrong, even if it was on the cover of the New York Times or major publications in Europe, the regulator said, well, Google has to downrank that search if the person requests it. And so, is that truth? It's regulation in Europe, but these kind of things are complicated problems that are independent of the technology. They're kind of the human factors. But internet goes everywhere, and blockchain can go everywhere. And only 5% of the world's population are in this country. So whatever regulations come from this government are going to apply to 5% of the internet. And 95% of the internet are not really subject to those regulations. And that's true of any country: China, India, Russia, US, Canada.
All right, so let's take one more question.
So one of the beauties of Bitcoin is the democratization of money into people's hands, taken away from the powers that be. What is it as a crowd that we can do to be able to take away the powers that be and put it into the hands of the crowd and hopefully make some money out of it in the health space?
Basically, ICO was the largest hype or bubble in the human history, right? So I think the number one killer application for Ethereum and Bitcoin is ICO. So whoever wanted to participate in ICO, you buy Ethereum or Bitcoin first. So I think for healthcare killer app, I haven't seen any yet. So the most popular one is the CryptoKitty. It actually the number one killer application for Ethereum, which is the first. So I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it will come and very fast before we know it. Maybe you can tell us.
Well, I can tell you about the stuff that we're working on. We want to be able to democratize access to fund areas of research. And traditionally, it's been restricted to a bunch of VCs and private equity firms and hedge firms. Hedge funds, or if you're lucky enough, you can access public markets. But life sciences are of utmost importance to every one of us. It affects, the results affect every one of us. So if you could democratize access in terms of whether you want to crowdfund a project, fund a researcher, and also keep track of that event, and if you're able to get something back from that contribution, that's something that democratizes access to specific areas of research that people want. Instead of research funding being allocated by decentralized players, whether they be state, nation states, or a few banks, hedge funds, VCs, whatever. So that's one area to look at. The other one would be obviously insurance. You can completely rebuild a healthcare insurance company from scratch and disintermediate the biggest intermediaries out there in fintech, the insurance companies.
regulation has created in health 3 categories of products in pharmaceuticals. There's the regulated, legal, FDA-approved drugs that have been through the audits and been through the testing, and that's about $1 trillion a year market. Cryptocurrencies are about 1/3 of $1 trillion now. And the health supplements, meaning that it hasn't gone through the FDA regulatory process, is about a $200 billion a year business. And then illegal drugs, which have not are regulated as not to be used, are also about a $200 billion a year business. So that's $1.4 trillion per year of pharmaceuticals that are in the purview of things that blockchain and can help audit and test. And there's the category of trials and research called phase 4 trials, which are after the drug has been approved, or it's illegal, or it's a nutraceutical, and it's out in the market and millions of people are taking it. The health results of those people can be tracked in a more public way at a lower cost, and the results of that can't be modified by an entity that's funding it or has an economic interest in it. So those are some things related to the regulatory part of it in the healthcare.
Yeah, something I want to add is we shouldn't go out of the world and have blockchain and try to just impose a use case for the technology. Something that I've seen a lot by working with Tim Draper at Draper University was a lot of people wanting to use this technology and coming up with different startups and just trying to build a use case. Like for any startups, it's like looking at a problem, looking at the value chain and how you can really add value, like by taking away the middleman, like insurance or in different other areas, and solving it with blockchain is just one solution. But you really need to ask key questions like: is there an intermediary that needs to? Are there different multi-part parties that will benefit from using blockchain? Is the immutable part of blockchain something that will add value to this solution instead of just looking for?
Great summary. So I would like you to give a big hand of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for coming here tonight, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I think it's been very fruitful for everyone, and in case you still have questions, feel free to mingle around. Be aware that Indiebio is giving some tours around the facility, and I'm pretty sure there's still a little bit of food left, so hang around, talk, and connect. And for those who were wondering, I realized I forgot to introduce myself. So my background is in life sciences and technology, and I've been recently to the Aqua Climate, which is a hackathon organized along with the Climate Conference in Bonn, Germany. So we touched a lot of topics around sustainability and innovation in these topics, and I got really curious about how blockchain relates to life sciences. Because in the end, it's also something that I enjoy studying. And on another note, I'm also a founder at Serendipity, which is, as Reese mentioned, like this example where you can own a piece of a building with a token. That's pretty much it, where you can own a piece of a co-living co-working space through a token, and then have also rights to decide and vote where the community goes. So thanks a lot, everyone, for coming, and enjoy your night.
Hope I wasn't in the way too much of the camera.
Oh, no, it's good. Thank you.